All right, so I got a lot of messages, Twitter, so tweets, Facebook messages, even messages on my website, ericdjuly.com, getting some stuff on my contact sheet. People wanting to know my thoughts on this. And it's mainly because of the fact that it's everywhere. Now, first and foremost, let me say I do appreciate you guys reaching out to me. I know a lot of people consider my perspective somewhat valuable because I actually read a lot of the comics. I don't just sit up here and just talk about it in terms of what is popular and such, and just grabbing quick summaries online just to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. And I do appreciate that. That's what I pride myself in. That's why we read a lot of good comics and a lot of bad comics, because we want to actually go in depth. And today we're going to be talking about Dark Knight's Return, The Golden Child. This is the book that everybody's talking about for reasons that we are going to get into. Now, I'm not that biggest fan of alternate universes. This is DC Black Label. A lot of this stuff is one-offs. A lot of this stuff sometimes is connected to other stories, but for the most part, it's just one-shots and one-offs. And sometimes, by that I mean, well, I guess it can't be one-shots, because they do have different books that will drop. You may get a book of 4, throughout DC Black Label, a particular run. So this is obviously geared for more adults. This is the whole point of DC Black Label. So while I appreciate that, I don't necessarily consider it, legitimate, because it's not canon, right? I've told you guys, I have a video, you can go watch that, talking about alternate universes and why I'm against it. But the reason why people are talking about this, and let's go ahead and cut to the chase, is that Trump appears in it. Like, that's why people are tripping out, because Trump appears in it, and it's not like a depiction of him. It's Trump. It's him, and I'm going to show you guys a little bit of that here in a bit. But we start the story with Laura and John. So baby John, Superboy, if you will, who is this golden child, right? So the book is centered around him, but he kind of has this like weird look to him. He doesn't really look like a boy. But that's neither here nor there. You also see old Batwoman in the front in Carrie. So we'll see. I don't know if they're going to sort of piggyback off of this, but Frank Miller, some of this story does connect to some of his older work. But Frank Miller here is the writer. And as a breakdown, as far as what happens, just know that Darkseid is working with Joker. And they're trying to do something, which is kind of a mess as far as what exactly they're trying to do, or why he's working with Joker, or why Joker is working with him. But this whole election thing and how they're doing this whole deal is manufactured by way of Joker to get people riled up and stuff like that. So people are rioting, people are taking it to the streets, and you have Carrie Batwoman sort of trying to nullify the issues that are coming out of all this, and obviously having the help of Laura and the Golden Child, as they are Kryptonian and stronger than everybody. So really the only thing that happens is that Darkseid fights Laura and John, and they win, and then Batwoman throws a rock they weaken him, right? So Darkseid is able to get hit, and I think she throws like a rock or a brick at him, and he hurts himself. So that's what I'm left to. That's the whole entire story. There's nothing more important than what I just told you. That's it, like straight up. Now imagine just a character like Darkseid being defeated like that, right? That's why, again, I don't like one-shots like that. I don't like those one-off stories. They really annoy the mess out of me, because they do stuff like that, and I don't like those alternate universes. That ain't Darkseid. But aside from it being an absolute mess, and if you read Frank Miller before, sometimes he can do that. It's kind of hard to keep up with. But aside from the Trump stuff, it's a mess. Aside from all of that, it's a mess in itself in terms of how it flows, the dialogue. It's hard to keep up with it sometimes, and it doesn't make any sense. And I guess that's why people's frustrations are a little where they are. Well, let's say this. That's why people are talking about it in the way they're talking about it, is because they see the sort of Trump symbolism and such. And also, if you read some of the rhetoric, such as the beginning, I don't know if it was John or Laura. Let me look at that. No, it's Laura. Said, No. It wasn't. Excuse me. It was Laura saying stuff like, these guys are looking down on all of these people, and they cook all of this food and then basically killing stuff off and being a mess and stinking up the place and fossil fuels and stuff like that. They also take, which I did enjoy, they also take a shot at democracy. More so, I don't know if it was John, if they actually took a shot at it, looking at how reckless these people are and like basically saying, wait a minute, these are the agents of democracy. You are the people that get to vote. But the whole obvious thing that people are going to discuss, and I'll show you guys here some of that, is that he's a Trump. He has Joker, or Trump is a Joker, or Joker is a Trump. Excuse me. Trump is a Joker puppet right here. So you could take that in a lot of different ways. And I'm going to explain to you what I got from it after hearing a little bit. But aside from that, at the end, we have, like, they call him governor. They don't call him president. But there's a part where, let me get there towards the end where Batgirl has to stop the feed because of right here, where it's basically Trump rhetoric too. So he doesn't just look like Trump; he talks like him. He's like, he says things like, "But it's gonna stop us. Believe you. It's gonna stop us, or not gonna stop us. Dang, believe you, me. We've got a lot of muscle to flex, and we're flexing it, brothers. Set things straight. We're going to set things straight. We're going to get things rolling." Like, these are things you can imagine Trump saying it like that. So, by the way, let me just show you guys. I don't have a digital copy of it, so you kind of got to work with me here. That's pretty much what it is. So, you're left to think, why put him in there, right, and depict him as such? Is it Frank Miller's? And I don't know his personal politics. Unfortunately, I'm left to believe that he is at the very least, some of the Trump hating mainstream leftists that various amounts of comic book artists are. And he's letting his politics leak out because it's pointless in that sense. It's, why is Trump there? Aside from him being the president, which is pretty relevant, to be fair. And when I was reading it at the beginning, I'm like, yeah, okay, like, let's see where they go with it. I'll give them a chance. But the problem is that it's predictable. Maybe they knew they were going to get us talking. That was the whole point of it. But either way, it's predictable because you look at it from the standpoint of, okay, Joker is basically, what they're depicting is a bad person is controlling Trump, and Trump is getting people riled up and fighting each other. So that's the sort of narrative that you take from it. And it's pretty on the nose because it's not like a depiction or a fake depiction, like, the guy kind of looks like him, but he doesn't look like him. No, it's clearly Trump. They know it's Trump. We more so know it's Trump. The little doll, the more so the puppet that he has looks exactly like him, and he's getting people amped up going into this election. So the problem that I have with it, and that makes me believe that it's just Frank Miller putting his personal politics out there, essentially saying, hey, Orange Man, bad, you guys are, he's getting us riled up, and we can fight this, we can fight him, because people that are bad people are controlling him. If you look at it like that sort of symbolism, the fact that him being in there is completely, or even it's a mess, right? The whole election deal doesn't even make really hardly any sense, but to be synonymous to what's taking place right now. But in the context of the actual deal, because they don't actually ever call him Trump or anything like that, and it's the fact that it's depicted like that, it just makes me feel that it's just Frank Miller's personal politics bleeding out into the actual book, and he put it in book form because it's pointless in a sense that it doesn't connect. Like, they could have used literally anybody else, like they always tend to do in comic books anyway. Sometimes they do use presidents and stuff like that. Not saying that hasn't ever been done, because it absolutely has been done. But they easily could have used some other figure to say or suggest that this is happening. But they didn't. They instead used, not, again, just a person that looks like Trump. It almost looks like, what was it? Oh, man. Lois Lane, issue number 1, when I talked about how the personal politics are bleeding into the comic books because they have like that Sarah Sanders be getting grilled by Lois Lane, and it's just so on the nose and so corny in the way that they do it. But what was that? It says Governor Unmasked re-election candidate is a Joker stooge, and then it has Trump's face on it. You know, obviously everything had to hit the fan. They kind of, the plans are all out there and all of that stuff, and it's like, look, man, I've talked about this I don't know how many times. I know a lot of people say they don't want politics in comics. I'm not of that opinion in terms of it not being in comics, because I recognize it's politics by literal definition. It's always been in comic books. Always. You're not going to, definitely when you're talking about superheroes and such and them having to combat with government, having that sort of realism, it's inevitable that politics are going to be taken into consideration. The thing that I feel separates the now from back in the gap not only is just the on the nose stuff, because yes, they have used presidents before. You know, if you follow Captain America and such, even Trump actually showed up recently, if I'm not mistaken, in a Cage comic, like a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But there's no balance. It's just, okay, mainstream leftism, orange man bad, and that's it. That's all that it is. And it's just so predictable, man. It's so predictable, and it's lousy and it's lazy, because what's happening is, and what it makes me feel like as the reader, it makes me feel as if you guys are simply using characters that you did not create for the most part. Now, again, when you come talk about, I believe that version of Batwoman, Frank Miller did actually create. But it's so on the nose, it's so lazy, and it's so unbalanced, and it makes for a predictable narrative. And when you consider comic book realm and the lack of, I mean, you look at the past 8 years prior to Trump becoming president, the Obama administration, if he were to show up in a comic book or there is any sort of reference or anything that was remotely like on the nose, it was always in a positive light. I mean, he's on a freaking cover of was that Spider-Man, which I've talked about on this channel, and the Amazing Spider-Man back in the day. So when you take that in consideration, and then you look at stuff like this, it's like, okay, there's clearly absolutely no balance here. There's no balance here. You guys are, for the most part, predictable mainstream leftists. And that's what, to me, when I say that the politics portion of the comic book industry in terms of putting that stuff out there is corny, is lazy, and I'm tired of it, that's what I mean. It's no balance. It'd be one thing if there was sort of alternative, if they're going to reference regular politics or real world politics, have other sorts of scenarios and other people's perspective that don't just fit, when it comes to the big two, don't just fit mainstream leftism, like Democrats and stuff like that, and being depicted in a positive light, and then the Republicans being depicted in a negative light. Like, that stuff is old. It got old really fast, and I feel like the election, which I did another video on this as well, the election unfortunately set everybody over the deep end, because everybody now is an activist, and everybody feels like their platform, when it comes to characters, again, they did not create. They have to use these characters to promote their personal social preferences and agendas and politics. And it's just lazy, man. And that's my issue with it. I'm not going to be irrational like I know a lot of people are about it, but I actually read it. And the problem that, or more so what makes this feel like it's just Frank Miller putting out his personal politics, is because they could have used anybody else, and it's still, first of all, it was pointless, but it still would have made as much sense if they didn't. So why bring him in, aside just to say that he's bad and he's getting everybody riled up and he's controlled, and all, like, aside to just say that, why use him? There's no balance, man. And it's old, y'all. It's old. It's like, if I'd have less to say about that sort of corny stuff if there was balance, but there's no balance, man. There's no balance. Everybody, it seems like in the mainstream comic book industry, and that even people that have like track records and are doing good work, such as Frank Miller, it's sent them all. Greg Rucka, I talked about this as well, sends these guys over the deep end, man. Like, they're done after once Trump got elected. Like, these guys turn into deranged lunatics, man. And of course they have to use their art to sort of project their personal politics onto everybody. And it's so whack, man. It's just lazy, yo. But aside, even if you didn't, this is why I say, I'm not going to say that's the least of the problem, but this is why I say this book sucks. And the fact that I'm saying that is real talk. This book sucks. Even if they didn't use the Trump thing, but it magnifies the suckiness when you take that into consideration, because it feels like this book just exists to be a shot at Donald Trump. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know how many more of these reviews I have to do about these comic books. And I'm sitting here saying the same thing, where your politics are predictable. These guys, for the most part, have the same political positions, give or take a position or two, but for the most part, it encompasses what you would consider mainstream leftism. We rarely get any books or any on the nose stuff that depicts, let's say, libertarianism, right? Like, that's so on the nose about it, like they do with this sort of stuff, where you got to begin there talking about fossil fuels and all this sort of stuff. Is like, and then I forgot to tell you is that look, they're looking at these protesters. Look at them, fists clenched in a righteous rage, eyes glistening with hope, and that's clearly Greta Thunberg magazine right there. That is clearly her. Like, you couldn't draw a better version of her. Of course, they don't say it, but that's clearly her. It's predictable. Like, what else am I supposed to say, man? And it just gets old. I'm doing these reviews and I'm sitting there having to combat chumps who always like, oh man, like, you overreact, and you're like, no, bro, like, this is in the books. I read them. You don't. And it gets old, man. Like, because Black Label in concept, I'd argue what I thought should have happened with Black Label, DC Black Label. I thought that all of that should have been considered canon, but it should have been just appealing to more adults. So they could have had narratives and things that were, obviously a part of the main universe, but it should have been just mature stuff that was more so geared towards people like myself. So the concept itself I have no issue with. But yes, it's an alternate. It's sort of, all of these exist in different universes, different stories being told of characters that you know, and this particular story just it's skippable. It's a skippable book. It's a skippable book that seems to only exist to put forth the personal politics of Frank Miller. And if I'm wrong on Frank Miller, I'm 100% willing to be wrong on Frank Miller. I don't know his personal politics. But you gotta, at some point in time, you have to take into consideration that, well, why is it that when we do have those sort of on the nose politics, they all represent mainstream leftism? I'd imagine that if it was like Obama being depicted as a person that was being more so controlled by Joker, that wouldn't fly, because it doesn't exist. But I got a lot of orange man bad coming from both political parties, but both mainstream comics in terms of Marvel and DC. That's all I'm saying. So even if it wasn't his personal politics, I believe they allowed this to be printed because it fit the personal politics that they generally deem as acceptable. It's getting old, man. No, not getting old. It got old.